Our final speaker this morning is Michele Leonhart, Administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Ms. Leonhart is a career DEA special agent. She actually began her career in law enforcement as a Baltimore City police officer. With the DEA, she served as special agent in charge of one of the largest field divisions in Los Angeles. Ms. Leonhart was confirmed as the Deputy Administrator in 2008. She is the recipient of numerous awards and commendations, to include the Presidential Rank Award for meritorious service from both President Clinton and President Bush. She was nominated to be DEA Administrator by President Obama. I am particularly pleased at this time to present Ms. Michele Leonhart, Administrator of the Drug Law Enforcement Administration.
President McNeil, Executive Director Johnson, and my fellow law enforcement colleagues of the IACP, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today at the most important gathering of law enforcement executives, not just in this country, but in the world. And the Drug Enforcement Administration is proud to be a part of this conference, participating in dozens of educational sessions, being one of the 800 exhibitors, and banding together with thousands of leaders in law enforcement for a common purpose: safer communities, a more secure nation, and a just world. And I was thinking yesterday of my long-term relationship with the IACP, and it goes back to the early 80s. I was much younger. I was a rookie agent, and I got suckered into going to an IACP conference. My bosses said, "Do you want to go to a conference in Salt Lake? There's about 1,000 police officers there, and you're single, you may meet somebody." I took them up gladly on the offer and spent 5 days sitting in the exhibitor hall, manning the DEA booth. But I did get to go to the General Assemblies, and I remember thinking back then, oh my God, everybody's old. So that means one thing: I'm old, because I'm here today. There's not a community in this country that has not been impacted by drug abuse. And nations around the world that have been exploited by powerful drug trafficking organizations are also experiencing rising drug abuse rates. We see this happening in Europe, and we see this happening in Asia and in Africa, and we see this happening in Mexico and Central America. The DEA has been working side by side with you to combat drug abuse and drug trafficking for almost 40 years. And I'm here today simply to say thank you. We have shared resources. We are on each other's task forces. We have celebrated our joint successes, and we have together mourned the loss of officers and agents. And our condolences to the Border Patrol on the death this morning of yet another Border Patrol agent. And we want to thank you for being there for us when, a year ago, DEA Special Agent Joe Piersanti, executing a drug mission in Afghanistan, was shot by the Taliban in the head. Thank you for being there for us. For this common purpose, we have set aside our egos, we have forged relationships, and we've fostered trust. And by working together, we have seen huge successes in this drug crusade. Cocaine use in our country has been cut 40%, and meth has been cut 50% since 2006. And the U.S. cocaine supply has been disrupted. Colombian cartels have all been eliminated, and 24 of Mexico's 37 most wanted have been either arrested or killed, reducing the power and the influence of all 7 of Mexico's powerful drug cartels. But that is seldom written about. You seldom see it in the papers. It's not discussed on the news. The only message getting any print or any airtime is that the drug problem can't be solved, so legalization is the answer. And this message wrongly relays that it will solve budget problems, it will stop the cartels, and marijuana is not dangerous. As law enforcement professionals who know your streets better than anyone, you know that is all a sham. The landscape of the debate over marijuana is being transformed, and troublingly, developments in perception, in use, and in laws. We all have a responsibility to act now. We can't let groups, rogue groups, like Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP, speak for us. We know the dangers of marijuana use. We must be unified, and we must be heard with one powerful voice. I know all of us are worried because of what that means for our future. Today, we have the highest marijuana usage rates since the 70s, with 1 in 16 high school seniors smoking marijuana daily. The last time we saw numbers like that, we saw soon usage of other drugs rise. And these surrender messages come at a time when we are having unprecedented success going after the world's biggest and baddest and those most responsible for our country's drug supply. Commissioner Kelly just talked about emerging technology. Well, together we've developed the tools and we have taken advantage of new technologies to share information with each other better than we ever have before. And this makes all of us, from the trooper on I-80 to the case agent in Miami to the beat cop in Boston, better equipped, better informed, and more effective in facing today's criminals. It has been shown time and time again that together we can accomplish anything, we can meet any challenge, and we can overcome any obstacle in our path. Simply put, our successes are much better when we all work together. When our officers, our agents, our analysts use the tools that are available, such as the license plate readers, deconfliction tools, and the El Paso Intelligence Center, for example, they are better able to anticipate and act because they'll have a better idea about what they'll find when they actually stop that car, or when they do that knock and talk, or when they hit that house. And ultimately, they'll be able to build better cases that lead to the disruption and the dismantlement of the organizations supplying drugs to the gangs fueling violence in your neighborhoods, those distributing drugs on your streets, and ultimately to the cartels and the major drug trafficking organizations operating off our shores. Working together, we can take a street case and we can piece together links to produce something with an impact well beyond what was ever imagined. For example, consider twin brothers Pedro and Margarito Flores in Chicago. The case began by a task force making heroin street buys. But by working the connections together, we were able to identify the source of supply, who was none other than Chapo Guzman, head of the Sinaloa cartel and Mexico's most wanted fugitive. Working together with you in targeted communities across the country, we have committed personnel and resources to support your efforts focused on drug-related violence. Specifically, we've honed in on those checkpoints where cartel members, traffickers, gang members, and their leadership operate. And for example, since June, we've been partnering with the Philadelphia Police Department ATF, and others in Commissioner Ramsey's effort to increase pressure from all sides in high-crime neighborhoods to rid them of violent career criminals. And while it's still ongoing, together we've developed evidence in homicide investigations. We've found fugitives, we have shut down open-air drug markets, and we've taken a significant number of guns, drugs, and violent criminals off the streets. As a result of these kinds of collaborations, we've been able to extend and expand local investigations, taking the investigations beyond your cities and to destinations outside of the United States. And this is where DEA plays an important, even a unique role, because through our 85 foreign offices in 66 different countries and the international relationships we have built, we've been able to target the source of the drugs and stop the massive shipments before they ever get to our borders. We're doing so by going into the jungles to destroy drug labs, interdicting go-fast boats and submersibles, and training specialized drug law enforcement officers around the world who are aggressively pursuing with us global trafficking organizations, their leaders, and their facilitators. Just yesterday, we had meetings with our colleagues from the French police, our colleagues from Australia, and always our colleagues from Colombia. As I mentioned earlier, drug addiction does not respect borders and is a growing problem worldwide. For example, DEA recently co-hosted a conference in Tampa on the flood of a cheap form of crack that is sweeping through neighborhoods in Brazil cities, and it was all about what can we do to help them, in part based on lessons we all learned from America's crack epidemic in the 90s. Narco-traffickers spread death. You know they disregard the rule of law, and they undermine governments, stability, and peace wherever they operate. And they are ruthless, violent, criminal organizations that often have links to terrorists. And this includes in Latin America with organizations like the Shining Path in Peru or the FARC in Colombia, or AQIM in West Africa, the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and extremist groups in the Middle East. Working together, our international partnerships have paid off for them, for DEA, and for you, by reducing the presence of drugs and drug traffickers, though there is much more work that we have to do. Still, when you consider the drug kingpins we are taking out of business together, it's both impressive and unprecedented. Of the biggest and baddest drug kingpins in the world, with your help, we have indicted 75% of them. We have arrested, we have put the cuffs on more than 50% of them, and we have extradited to the United States nearly a third. Just since 2008, Mexico has extradited over 400 criminals to our country, and that's more than any time in history. And these extraditions include many high-value targets from all of the cartels, and the consequence of this loss of leadership is playing out in the disintegration. Just as we saw in Colombia, this fragmentation means the cartels are weakening. We and our brave partners in Mexico know this fight is far from over, but we are succeeding. In 1992, no one thought Colombia would ever be free of the violence associated with drugs and drug trafficking, yet their progress over the past 2 decades has been extraordinary, and that's much to do with the great Colombian National Police. And today, their narco-trafficking organizations have been decimated. Colombia has a growing economy, a flourishing democracy, and they're a net supporter of security. And just last month, Colombia saw the arrest of Daniel Barrera, call him Loco Barrera. He's the last of the Colombian kingpins. He's the last of the Colombian drug lords. His appearance was altered, and he used acid to remove his fingerprints, and he was smart. He never used his cell phone to communicate, and he was hiding in Venezuela for years, but we got him. And it's a matter of when, not if, we'll get other fugitives and priority targets who are responsible for shipping drugs and death to our country and to our cities. And these international successes have a direct impact on the supply of drugs at home. For example, through enforcement at home and abroad, we've seen a 40% reduction in overdose deaths from cocaine, a 72% reduction in cocaine production in Colombia over the past decade. And we all share in these successes, but we also confront new challenges. It was you, our nation's chiefs and sheriffs, who are out there letting the press, the public, and leaders know about the dangers from designer synthetic drugs being sold as bath salts, K2 spice, incense, or plant food. You saw that they were being smoked and injected by our teens. They were getting our kids sick. They were going to the ER, and in some cases, they were dying. Those who sold these drugs to them knew exactly what they were selling, claiming it was both legal and not for human consumption. But you rang the alarm bell, and we have had great progress ever since, including the passage and enforcement of ordinances at the local and state level, and just this year, with new federal laws. We now have the tools needed to go after the producers, the distributors, and the retailers of these drugs. And thanks to you, these cooperative efforts came together in joint takedowns this summer, like Operation Logjam, which resulted in the arrest of nearly 100, the confiscation of over 5 million packets of synthetic drugs, material to make another 13 million more, and the seizure of tens of millions in cash and assets. And you're also working with us to respond to our fastest growing drug challenge, which some correctly are calling an epidemic, and that is the abuse of prescription drugs. Prescription drug abuse costs our nation more than $50 billion a year. More Americans visit hospital emergency rooms because of pharmaceutical drugs than all other illicit drugs combined, and more than 20,000 Americans die each year from prescription overdose deaths. DEA is directly engaged in confronting this challenge, and the enforcement actions we have taken together with you are a critical part to reversing the disturbing trend by finding those individuals and organizations that are causing so much misery for so many. And this includes the work of 48 DEA tactical diversion squads, which have teamed up with you in almost every state. These teams of agents and diversion investigators and task force officers are successfully shutting down pill mills. They're preventing doctor shopping, and they're reducing the misuse of prescription drugs all around the country. And you see the results of this partnership in places like Florida, where DEA, in conjunction with more than 500 of you, state and local law enforcement officers, work together to put in place an aggressive, comprehensive strategy to stop the diversion of prescription controlled substances. Our operation, we called Operation Pill Nation, has resulted in the arrest of over 100 individuals, including 43 doctors, and the seizure of more than $19 million. And these efforts are driving the pill mills out of business, have them on the run, and we will not give up. Public awareness of the dangers of prescription drug misuse is multiplied by the thousands of law enforcement organizations, and especially the IACP, who is the first partner who made 5 national prescription drug take-back events possible. We just had one last Saturday. The first 4 resulted in the collection of over 700 tons of pills. There are other examples of how we help one another in this shared fight. Today, we have more than 2,500 state and local task force officers working side by side with DEA on specialized drug teams, and we're expanding. And we've shared more than $1.4 billion in seized cash and assets with you since 2008, and we've supplied more than 100,000 training opportunities to state and local officers just in the past 2 years. But it's a two-way street. Just as you're learning from us each and every day, we also learn, grow, and develop our abilities to be better partners with you. And while our scope is federal, we know that it's our nation's communities outside the Beltway that make our country great. And each act we take that promotes justice and fairness makes all of us better in our careers as law enforcement professionals, in our roles as moms and dads and brothers and sisters, and as proud Americans who others look up to for help, and as a source of authority, respect, and strength in the communities we serve. On behalf of the men and women of DEA who serve around the world, I want to thank you for your continued partnership, and thank you for working together with us. Thank you.